The rain came down in thin silver needles, the night Eleanor Hale gave birth in the back room of a forgotten countryside clinic, the kind of place where secrets stayed buried and stories never left the walls. She didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't even flinch when the final wave of pain washed through her, because the only thing louder than the storm outside was the silence of the man who had promised to stay. Adrian had vanished hours before, leaving only a hastily scribbled note on the pillow, a note she didn't have the heart to open. She knew what it said even before she unfolded it with trembling fingers. "I can't do this. I'm sorry." That was it. No explanation, no apology. That sounded real. Just absence. And yet, what haunted her most wasn't that he left, it was the way he had looked at her the night before. His eyes distant, calculating, as if weighing something far heavier than parenthood, as if someone had whispered something to him, as if he'd learned something about her she didn't even know herself. She didn't know then that a message had reached him from a hidden corner of the world, a message that would have changed everything if he'd been brave enough to face it. Eleanor Hale had just become the sole heir to $1 trillion trust fund and powerful, globally entangled fortune that wasn't just money but influence, legacy, and danger wrapped in the same breath. But she knew none of that, not yet. All she knew was the weight of her son against her chest and the crushing fear of the future closing in. The doctor, an elderly woman with soft eyes and a voice that carried unspoken pity, cleaned the newborn and placed him into Eleanor's arms. "He's healthy," she said quietly, almost apologetically, as though she knew the cost of bringing a new life into a world that had already begun to twist with shadows around them. Eleanor held him tighter, feeling the warmth of his tiny body seep into her cold, shaking hands. She named him Leo, after her father, though she barely remembered the man. He had disappeared when she was 5, leaving behind a trail of rumors about debts, disappearances, and betrayals that seemed too wild to be true until now. The moment she whispered the name, the clinic's power flickered, the lights dimmed, and for a heartbeat it felt as if the darkness outside pressed its face against the windows. Listening, Eleanor brushed it off as exhaustion, but the doctor didn't. Her hands stilled, her breathing went shallow, her gaze flickered to the door, as if expecting someone to walk in. Someone unwelcome. Eleanor didn't notice. She was still staring at her child, memorizing him, grounding herself. What she didn't know was that far away, across oceans and borders, a man in a tailored suit stood before a sealed steel vault larger than a cathedral, holding a document embossed with an insignia so ancient even governments bent around it. The document confirmed Eleanor's inheritance, activated seconds after a system detected her father's death in a remote, unmarked location. Eleanor had inherited everything: estates, shadow companies, private security forces, coded accounts tied to nations and corporations, assets that shifted the balance of world power without anyone ever knowing her name. And with her father gone, she was now the world's most powerful invisible figure. The suit-clad man closed the vault with a trembling hand. He knew that the moment the news spread, enemies her father had kept at bay would come for her, and if she wasn't found by her own people first, she would be erased before she ever learned her legacy existed. Back in the clinic, Eleanor wrapped Leo in a blanket and tried not to think about the empty space beside her. The nurse avoided her gaze. The doctor moved too quickly, as though preparing her for discharge wasn't just a routine procedure, but an urgent necessity. Eleanor felt it then, a shift in the air, a prickle across her skin, the sense of being watched. It started when she stepped into the hallway. A tall man in a dark coat stood at the end of the dim corridor, face obscured by the shadows, body stiff as stone. He wasn't a patient. He wasn't staff. He didn't move even when she glanced at him. When she blinked, he was suddenly gone. But the echo of his presence lingered like smoke. The doctor insisted she leave before sunrise, pushing her out with a firmness that didn't match her gentle nature. "It's safer for you this way," she whispered, but refused to explain. Eleanor had no car, no money, no family, nowhere to go except the small apartment she and Adrian had shared. When she arrived, she found the door unlocked and had forced, just carelessly left open, as if he'd run out in a hurry. Inside, everything was untouched, but wrong. Their photos were missing from the wall, his clothes gone, but there was something else: a strange metallic card left on the kitchen counter, engraved with a symbol she didn't recognize, a lion's head encircled by a ring of stars. She picked it up, and the moment her thumb brushed its surface, a thin seam of blue light split down the center, revealing a hidden chip glowing faintly. She nearly dropped it, but instinct told her to keep it. Something about it felt familiar, as if she had seen it in a childhood dream or an old memory blurred at the edges. That night, she barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the man in the hallway. She heard whispers that didn't come from her own mind. Leo slept soundlessly, far too calm for a newborn, as if he too sensed that they weren't alone. At 3:15 a.m., she awoke to the sound of a soft click from outside her door. Not a knock, not footsteps. A deliberate click, like someone unlocking something. She froze, clutching Leo against her. Then the sound of paper sliding under the door. When she finally gathered the courage to retrieve it, she found a single envelope, rough and thick, sealed with black wax bearing the same lion and stars symbol. Inside was a short message written in an elegant looping script. "We have found you. Do not trust the ones who come first." Protect the child. She read the note twice, a third time, then pressed it to her chest as panic began to rise. Someone knew her. Someone was watching her. Someone believed her son was in danger. And yet she didn't know why. As dawn broke, Eleanor made a decision that felt less like a choice and more like instinct. She had to leave, disappear. She packed only what she could carry, cradled Leo, and stepped out into the early morning mist. Unaware that a black SUV sat idling across the street with tinted windows hiding the men inside, they watched her walk away, silent, patient, waiting for the order either to capture her or eliminate her, whichever instruction arrived first. But before they could move, another car, sleek silver, unmarked, pulled up behind them. The men stiffened. They recognized it. Everyone in their world did. A woman stepped out, wearing a coat the color of midnight and gloves that shimmered faintly under the streetlights. Her presence alone made the men in the SUV tense. She approached them with slow, deliberate steps, tapped once on their window, and when the glass lowered a crack, she spoke 3 words that made their faces drain of color. "She is ours." The SUV pulled away immediately, vanishing into the fog as if swallowed. Eleanor never saw any of it. She walked down the street, unaware that forces older and more powerful than governments had begun to move around her, unaware that her father's empire had awakened the moment she gave birth, unaware that Adrian hadn't left because he wanted to, he had left because someone forced him to. Someone who believed Leo should never be raised by her. Someone who believed the child belonged to them. And so, with nothing but fear in her lungs, and Leo's warmth against her heart, Eleanor Hale stepped into a future she didn't understand, unaware that her inheritance had already begun rewriting the world around her, and that the next person to find her would decide whether she lived long enough to learn the truth. Eleanor had never been more aware of how loud her footsteps sounded than in the empty, early morning streets where the fog clung low and the city lights blurred into streaks of golden blue. Every sound made her flinch, every shadow made her tighten her grip on Leo. And yet she kept moving because some instinct deep in her bones told her that staying still would be fatal. She walked without direction, without plan, following only the pull of her fear until the sun crept over the skyline and the city began to stir. And that was when she saw the same tall man from the clinic standing across the street, half hidden behind a row of parked cars, watching her with an intensity that made her blood ice over. When she blinked, he stepped forward, not running, not threatening, but deliberate, as though he knew she would bolt if he moved too fast. And bolt she did. She turned so sharply she nearly stumbled, her bag swinging off her shoulder, and she rushed into the nearest alleyway, pulse hammering, heart drowning out every sound except the soft breaths of her sleeping son. She didn't see the second figure waiting in the alley until she collided with him. Her scream strangled in her throat as she stumbled back, clutching Leo like a shield. But the man raised his hands slowly, palms open, showing he carried nothing. He was younger than the man from the clinic, with sharp features and eyes that looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Eleanor," he said quietly, and the way he said her name told her he knew her far too well. She didn't respond. He took a single step closer, then stopped when he saw the terror in her posture. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "Your father sent me." That made her freeze because her father had been dead for years. The stranger saw the confusion flicker across her expression and nodded. He prepared for the day he wouldn't be here. Everything he protected, everything he built, it's yours now, and people will kill to take it from you, but I'm not one of them. Before she could react, a loud pop cracked through the alleyway, followed by a burst of dust from the wall beside her. A bullet. Someone was firing. Someone had found them. The stranger grabbed her arm and pulled her behind a dumpster just as another shot ricocheted off metal. "They moved faster than I expected," he muttered, breath uneven but controlled. He reached into his coat not for a gun, but for a small metallic device no larger than a coin that began to pulse with faint white light. The air around them shimmered. "This will hide us for a minute, maybe 2, he said. "We need to move before it burns out." Eleanor had no time to question it because she could already hear footsteps pounding toward the alley. The man grabbed her hand and led her through a narrow back exit into another street, then down a stairwell leading beneath an abandoned building. The shadows swallowed them as he guided her through a maze of corridors, until they reached a heavy steel door with a biometric lock. He pressed his thumb against the scanner. The lock clicked open. Inside was a dim underground safe room filled with screens, maps, encrypted radios, and a small cot pushed against the wall. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clearly designed for emergencies. Eleanor stood trembling, feeling more hunted than she had ever imagined possible, while the stranger finally exhaled as if relieved they'd made it. "My name is Rowan," he said, offering no last name. "I worked for your father for 17 years. He trusted very few people, but he trusted me to find you if anything happened." He glanced at Leo, still sleeping peacefully. And to protect the boy especially. Eleanor swallowed hard. "Why?" she whispered, but Rowan hesitated before answering. "Because your father believed your son would be the most valuable and dangerous successor the world has ever seen." Rowan explained what Eleanor had never known about her lineage, that the Hale Trust was not just money, but a global system of influence built over centuries, controlling silent partnerships in governments, tech conglomerates, defense contractors, and even covert humanitarian networks. Her father had led it quietly, avoiding public scrutiny, keeping Eleanor out of it to protect her from the predators who fed on power. But when he died, everything shifted to her. Now every ally and enemy in that world was searching for her. Adrian didn't leave by choice, Rowan added, watching her closely. He was threatened. They told him to walk away, or you and the child would disappear. He thought he was protecting you. Rage and heartbreak twisted inside her, and she didn't know if she wanted to cry or scream. But before she could respond, Rowan's expression changed. He stepped toward one of the monitors as a silent notification flashed red. A camera feed appeared, showing the alley above the same tall man from the clinic, flanked by two others, scanning the area, their movements, organized, efficient, tactical. They're not giving up, Rowan muttered. We need to leave this bunker. It's compromised now. He moved quickly, grabbing a small backpack filled with essentials and handing Eleanor a dark jacket to hide her distinct clothes. There's a safe route out of the city, he said, but once we're out, everything changes. You'll have to choose whether to embrace what you've inherited or keep running forever. They exited through a hidden tunnel that led to the sewer system beneath the city. The air thick and damp, the light dim and flickering. Rowan carried a compact flashlight, guiding them through winding passageways until they emerged in an old storm drain near the railway. A train thundered overhead, and he timed their movement perfectly so the vibrations masked the sound of the steel hatch as he opened it. They climbed out onto a deserted service platform. A contact will meet us, Rowan said. Someone your father trusted with his life. But the moment they stepped onto the platform, the lights flickered, then brightened, then died completely. Rohan froze. That's not supposed to happen. A soft click echoed from the far end of the tunnel, followed by slow, deliberate footsteps. Eleanor held Leo close as the shadows shifted into a silhouette she recognized. Even from a distance, the tall man from the clinic. Rowan stepped in front of her, pulling out a weapon this time, one with a design she'd never seen before. You're trespassing on Hale territory, Rowan said coldly. The tall man didn't respond. He simply lifted his hand, revealing the same lion and stars insignia Eleanor had seen on the metallic card. Rowan's eyes widened not with fear, but with disbelief. That's impossible, he whispered. The tall man stepped forward, his voice deep and calm. Stand down, Rohan. You're protecting her from the wrong people. Eleanor's breath caught as the stranger's gaze shifted to her steady, unwavering, almost familiar. Eleanor Hale, he said softly. You don't know me, but I have known you since the day you were born. Your father trusted me more than any man alive. My name is Cassian Ward. Rohan stiffened as though he'd heard a ghost. Cassian is dead, he growled. Your father buried him. But Cassian shook his head. Your father buried my identity, not me. He needed me off the grid to protect the air. His eyes lowered to Leo, and now the real threat is coming. The ones hunting you are not my people. Rowan didn't lower his weapon. Prove it. Without blinking, Cassian stepped forward, and though Eleanor expected Rohan to fire, something in Cassian's posture made even Rohan pause. Cassian reached slowly into his coat, pulled out a small leather-bound booklet, and tossed it to the ground. Rowan retrieved it cautiously, flipping it open, and his face drained of color. Eleanor saw only a glimpse, an ID marked with the highest cipher her father ever used. One reserved for his most critical operatives. Rowan stepped back in shock. You were the ghost executor, he whispered. Cassian nodded once. And now, the ones your father feared most know Eleanor is alive. They will not stop. Not until they have the child. Before Eleanor could process the meaning behind those words, a deafening explosion rocked the tunnel, sending dust and debris raining down as the far wall erupted. A squad of armed figures stormed through the smoke, their weapons glowing with the same blue pulse as the metallic card she'd found. Cassian grabbed Eleanor's arm. Run. Rowan covered them, firing precise shots that tore through the attacker's armor. Cassian led Eleanor down the tracks toward an emergency exit, but the tunnel above groaned violently as fractures spread across the ceiling. Time slowed as a massive section of concrete broke loose and plummeted toward them. Cassian shoved Eleanor forward with a force that knocked her to the ground, curling his body over hers just as the ceiling collapsed, engulfing them in dust and darkness. For a moment, everything was silent, too silent. Eleanor couldn't hear Rowan anymore, couldn't hear the attackers, couldn't even hear Cassian breathing. Panic surged as she pushed upward, coughing, clawing her way through the rubble until she felt strong arms lifting the debris away. Cassian, bruised but alive, pulled her out and urged her forward. They emerged into a maintenance corridor lit by emergency lights, alarms blaring faintly in the distance. Rowan appeared moments later, blood trickling down his forehead, but still standing. They're regrouping, he warned. We need to disappear now. Cassian turned to Eleanor with an intensity that made her chest tighten. From this moment on, he said, your life will never be ordinary. You must choose. Trust us and step into your father's world, or walk away and let others decide your fate. But understand this, your son Leo is the key to everything they want. And if you run without us, they will take him. Eleanor stared at the two men, one who had saved her life twice already, the other who had dedicated his existence to protecting a legacy she'd never asked for. And in that moment, as the alarms faded and the ground vibrated with approaching danger, she realized she couldn't run anymore. She had to fight. She nodded once, a small but decisive gesture. Cassian exhaled, Rowan straightened, and together they turned toward the corridor that would lead them out of the tunnel and into a world where Eleanor Hale was no longer invisible, no longer helpless, and no longer unaware of the empire that awaited her. The fate of the trillion-dollar trust, the enemies closing in, the future of her, soon all of it now rested on a single decision she had just made, and the war that decision had already begun.